And at 10, Five Nights at Boys. What the actual living hell is this game? Five Nights at Boys is a series of FNAF fan games made by using RPG Maker, so obviously not following the same principles as the original games. And it's a very crude take on the franchise that has you battling against party favors and recruiting other animatronics to join your team like a messed up version of Pokemon Mystery Dungeon. The ultimate goal of the game is to defeat all security cameras and then defeat the final boss, and clearly it has an entirely different tone than the other games. The first game is based on the original FNAF, but introduces characters from the second like Toy Animatronics, Balloon Boy, and the Puppet. The second game is based on FNAF 2, with Toy Freddy being the main protagonist, and the third is based on FNAF 3, with Springtrap and Golden Freddy as playable characters. The games also have a final mixed version with a new story and updated content and balancing. The creators of F-Boys were fans of Golden Freddy's debauchery simulator, so aspects of those games have been covered as well. What? Oh my god. And at 9, Five Nights at Ripley's. Mostly known as Space Seclusion, the gameplay is like FNAF meets Alien Isolation, and it doesn't work. The animations for the alien itself are just way too human. It definitely wouldn't walk like that. And that's what makes the game feel less scary. The free roam mechanic is interesting, but it's not really going to help anyone when you're supposed to be watching the cameras to see where the alien is going. The game doesn't tell you the controls and tries to set itself up to be such a big and fun experience because it has infinite levels that just keep getting harder. But that to me seems like lazy game development. Infinite levels with increasing difficulty is like mobile game design. Having things get difficult and then adding new features should be the way to do it. Just because there are infinite nights doesn't make it not a FNAF clone with an Alien Isolation twist. And the name, Space Seclusion. Really? Talk about not creative, you just opened up the thesaurus and then found a synonym for isolation. And where do the aliens live? Space. And at 8, Five Nights at Weed. Created by a super Christian, which I think is ironic in and of itself, the only video on GameJolt page is called I Love You, and it's just a crappy doll stop motion, and the only description of this game is a link to a couple of the sounds used in the game. The comments on the game are atrocious. Aside from people legit commenting first comment 2018 and first comment 2019, people are saying the game doesn't work and you can't do anything. They also are having viruses, as one of the commenters says. These comments are worse than the ones on the other FNAF videos hating on us for misgendering a robot. Like, it's literally a robot, who cares? They say the game isn't completable and that there is no point in playing it, and I'll take their comments as fact, because apparently even PewDiePie played this and couldn't get it to work. I don't want to give my computer some virus that's going to cause it to have to stay in its case for the next month and a half. Topical.
Number 7, FNAF 3. This troll happened while FNAF 3 was still in development. Scott took to Steam Greenlight to share that the third game had actually been cancelled because someone had leaked it all on GameJolt, and in frustration, he would be tossing in the towel on it. Scott claimed this had happened as a result of him being hacked. However, when you went to the page on GameJolt and you downloaded that game, it wasn't actually FNAF 3, but instead it was a game with a FNAF 3 inspired loading menu that was actually a reskin of one of Scott's older games. There is no pause button. Many fans freaked though before discovering this, and of course that Scott himself was actually behind the troll, because of course he was.
And at 6, Five Nights at Sonic's. Look, it's hard to make a game, no arguments. However, it's even harder to make a good game on Scratch. But the amount of Five Nights at Sonic games there are on Scratch hurts me on a deep level. I've talked about Five Nights at Sonic's before on another fan games list, but the thing is, it's not different from FNAF. The gameplay is exactly the same, if not a little clunkier, and the only thing that's different is the animatronics. They aren't even modeled, they're made to look 3D, they're just static. And while I understand what it takes to make a game, the rest of the FNAF fan base, or at least the majority, doesn't. So, they're complaining that the only way to make a good FNAF game is to add something new, but I disagree. You can have a good fan game that plays similarly to FNAF. Take Five Nights at Candy's for example. However, their graphics are on par if not better than the original FNAF. But a game like Joy of Creation Story Mode is a great game because it adds something new. If you want to make a great FNAF fan game, take your time with it. Have good graphics and craft a good story. Make your own characters and then you find something new to add into the mix and then boom, you're golden. Do something like just draw all the characters flatly with no shading and then use some of the same mechanics from FNAF 2 and it can't be good. And it definitely won't be. Just like my grammar. Halfway through into number 5, Ultimate Custom Night Roster. If you want to go down the path of Cassidy being the one you should not have killed, that's fine with me, as long as you don't use that path of thinking to insult anyone who thinks otherwise. Since, after all, nothing is truly proven with this series literally ever. But, if you do believe that, for some reason Cassidy is possessing William to keep him alive to continue suffering, you kind of have to ignore the animatronics present in Ultimate Custom Night. Because there is no possible way that Cassidy could know about the Nightmare animatronics. it doesn't make sense if she did. Crying Child is the one who's seeing these nightmares in his coma while in the hospital in FNAF 4, as evidenced by the flatline that we hear at the end of the game. And since he dies before waking up, he wouldn't be able to share this information with anyone. You can say that he let Cassidy know about them while they were sharing Golden Freddy or something, but that's you ignoring other details in the series. And if Cassidy wasn't Golden Freddy, how could she also be possessing William? You'd again be ignoring every other detail that we've learned about possession. And why are the animatronics calling the one you should not have killed him if it is Cassidy? Cassidy is a female in this universe, as evidenced by her counterpart in the novel trilogy and the only other human in the logbook. And if you want to say that they're saying him because of Golden Freddy, again, how could she be possessing both? And why would she make these animatronics that she is creating call her him? If she's mad about being killed, why would she be referring to herself by her animatronic? Okay, it doesn't make sense. Unless Cassidy is possessing William as the vengeful spirit, and the one you should not have killed is Crying Child, who Cassidy is using to torment William. But even still, for this to work, you'd have to ignore the nightmares being present in that game. And for the worst FNAF World game ever made. The funny thing about this title is that it's basically just FNAF World. Boom! Roasted! But actually though, the game is literally the worst FNAF World game. The screen is split into the full screen game and then another version of the exact same thing, taking up a quarter of your screen in the top left. The ability to focus on that corner is lost to me, and I don't want to have to touch this game with a 10-foot pole. The game gets stuck on a new item screen for like 5 minutes, and then it's just basically FNAF World, which is really illegal and does not fall under fair use since the damn thing isn't different enough. It's not like if the game has bugs and then you fix them, it's a different game. Unless it's Skyrim, because if it's Bethesda, it's not a bug, it's a feature. But still, fixing bugs or making more content doesn't change the contents of the game, and therefore the game is highly illegal. It's only at number 4 because it will get worse from here. Bear with me. These next few are laughable.
Number 3. Fun little game. When Scott commits to a troll, he definitely doubles down. This happened with FNAF 6 Pizzeria Simulator when Scott revealed that the screenshots he'd revealed for the game prior to its release were accurate to the tone, and that it was just supposed to be a light, fun game for fans to enjoy. It wasn't supposed to be a major release, he said. And having received negative feedback on the poor quality based on the screenshots, he just wanted to clarify. But he wasn't really clarifying, really. Was he? He was trolling us again. He wanted to troll us. He saw people coming for him and he's like, I see an opportunity to troll people by doubling down. As we learn when FNAF 6 was released, and it wasn't just a fun, light little game for the community, it was undoubtedly a major release. It was fun and light, but also very dark.
And 2, the worst Five Nights at Freddy's fan game. The worst Five Nights at Freddy's fan game ever is, as it suggests, the self-proclaimed worst FNAF fan game ever. Loosely based on the original FNAF game, the game itself has no plot, kind of like the original before the others came out. It takes characters from multiple different universes and puts them together in combination with canon characters like Chica, and also terribly made original characters. The list includes Bubsy the Bobcats, Shrek the Ogre, Chica the Chicken, Slime the Slime, Dolly the poorly made doll, Mad Father, a Psycho Man, and Ouija the evil Luigi who appears when you run out of power. But sadly enough, this game, despite all the bad characteristics of it, is beat out by one game. What could this game be? How on earth could it beat out the worst Five Nights at Freddy's fan game? Well, finally, and at number 1, Five Nights at the Car. The description of the game is, hey bro, thanks for doing this job. You are a 10-year-old kid who is in his car at the mall waiting for your mom, but weird things want to kill you, so your job is to protect yourself from them. If you're hearing this, you're crazy. What? This game is so absurdly bad, it hurts me. Thanks for doing this job. We're 10 waiting in a car. What job? The game is literally just a PNG file that looks absolutely atrocious with no functionality. Don't get me wrong, I know it takes a lot to make a game, but I could make a better game than this with Scratch. This is just a cardinal sin of humanity, and it needs to be put down. Take it out to pasture. Put a bullet between the eyes. God, I hope this was a joke. It's a PNG file. It's so bad. Oh my god, it makes me mad.
In a 10 same path.
Now, part of the strategy behind the FNAF games is that the animatronics will always follow the same route every time, or I guess rather they'll come towards you the same way every time. In FNAF 1 specifically, Bonnie always comes down the left hall, while Chica and Freddy always go down the right side, and the same remains true for the rest of the games, which technically, if you think about it, means that these characters are coded this way. If they were just free roaming, that would be one thing, but the fact that they come after you and do so the same way each time would suggest that this is actually intentional. I mean, yeah, sure, twice is a coincidence, but don't they say that 3 is a pattern? Well, it's the same thing here, okay? In multiple games, the animatronics come down the same path every time. FNAF 1, FNAF 2, FNAF 4, Ultimate Custom Night, and not even just that, but the fact that the animatronics do this multiple times within the same game. Hell, how many times does Bonnie come at you down the left hall in one night, let alone throughout the whole week that you play? So yeah, we would have to logically ignore this detail because it would muddy everything else up way too much. And we have been, actually. In at 9, 1987 Easter egg. At the end of every FNAF game, there is a bonus night. It gives you a bit more lore clues and more scares, and that's what we consider the 6th night. But then after beating it, you unlock a special 7th night where you can customize the level of the animatronics and give them specific difficulty ratings to see how you can actually handle those certain scenarios. However, if you were to do this with Five Nights 1, you'd obviously be looking for more clues since we literally had nothing else, and we were trying to figure out what would first be an incredible series of games. But if you tried to solve anything and you tried to be a little sneaky to figure out what that whole bite thing was about, and you put the animatronic levels to be 1987 in that order, like 1, 9, 8, and 7, the year of the bite, you'd end up getting instantly jump scared by Golden Freddy. Which is funny, but it could have had deeper implications. If you look at it through the lens of every detail means something, if you end up really thinking about it, and probably too much, you can end up seeing this as an implication that maybe Golden Freddy caused the bite of 87, and that Jeremy Fitzgerald, who we would play as in FNAF 2, who many assume to be the bite victim, could be the one possessing the animatronic. At least if we ignore that the whole missing children's incident thing takes place 2 years prior. But then again, that's just something else that we would have to ignore, so it still works. In at 8, Death Coin. In Ultimate Custom Night, you are able to get an item called a Death Coin. This allows you to use it and eliminate any animatronic from the game. This works with most animatronics. It removes them from play, and then you won't have to deal with them for the rest of that playthrough, or I guess technically life. I'm not really sure how Ultimate Custom Night defines things. But there is, at least to my knowledge, one animatronic that this coin does not work on, that being Golden Freddy. If you try it on Golden Freddy and you use the death coin on him, you end up getting jump scared by the Fredbear plush, who some believe is meant to be Psychic Friend Fredbear. And while it would make sense that you can't remove Golden Freddy because seemingly they'd be the one controlling everything, or the animatronic that gives you the most grief depending on the situation you believe is taking place, the fact that Fredbear is the one that jump scares you, the actual like plush, has to kind of be taken with a grain of salt. Because honestly, it may not have that deep of an impact. And if it did, we have really no idea what the hell that would be. Especially when Ultimate Custom Night seemingly tried to wrap up the Afton family storyline.
And it's 7, Five Nights at YouTube office. Hello. Welcome to your new super job at the YouTube office. Now, there's some things you need to know. First off, there are some YouTubers who tend to wander and sleepwalking. They may try to attack you, but don't worry, they probably won't. We've been looking for someone to fill this position for a while. No one seems to want it because of the rumors that have been going around. Rumor has it some YouTubers are possessed and haunt the YouTube offices at your scheduled work time. That's specific. Also, we have given you your very own PewDiePie head. It should work on all the YouTubers except PewDiePie himself. With PewDiePie, you have to keep a music box wound up. But if you don't, he will come after you no matter what. But don't worry, just wind up the music box. Put on the PewDiePie head if you need to, and everything should be good. Piece of cake. I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye. That is the description this game gives you, and I had to correct some grammar. And man, this guy doesn't even know how to use periods. Ellipses don't go at the end of every sentence. But also, the game cover is just bad. Maybe it's intended to be a riff on the YouTube thumbnails, but the fact that people in this game are big YouTubers shows that the decision would have been misguided. These YouTubers have good thumbnails. All you did was take Joey Graceffa's face and then cover Freddy's with it. And then put YouTube's logo over the Freddy title in the really crappy white box that you drew with the brush tool. I could have done something better using MS Paint. I do the thumbnails for most of these videos if you didn't know.
And at 6, crashing. Golden Freddy has some weird abilities, okay? Like, what's with the whole crashing us to the desktop thing? Every other animatronic sends us to the main menu, but Golden Freddy for some reason sends us to our desktop. It's a very odd detail that I don't think anyone was really questioning, but it certainly seems to indicate that there could be something special about the character. Well, I mean, something more. And I don't think that it's simply maybe they're just angrier than everyone else and something like that. It would have to be more symbolic, because the only character that, when killing us, crashes us to our desktop is Nightmare from FNAF 4. They're the only two animatronics to crash us to the desktop instead of to the main menu, and while with Golden Freddy it may not make much sense, with Nightmare having the same ability, it may set a baseline for what's really actually happening when this happens. Nightmare in FNAF 4 is representative of death. When Nightmare gets us, we crash to the desktop in that game and truly die, which would mean that the same would have to be true for Golden Freddy, right? But then, that would make a whole load of other things messy if you want to assume that Golden Freddy is a real animatronic and possessed by Cassidy, who also is possessing William. So, you would have to ignore that detail if you're going down that route.
Number 5. HTML Feud. There have been a few times that Scott has shared that game making is simply too much stress for him. And although I imagine that actually must be true sometimes, especially with all of us expecting so much from him, I don't think any of us believed that he didn't enjoy working on FNAF, right? At least we hoped it wasn't true. But when he started to hide arguments in the HTML code of his sites, where it seemed to make it seem like they were arguing with each other, fans thought for sure that his claims of being overworked and overstressed from constantly aiming to outdo himself were all part of some greater ploy. We didn't buy it. And that, of course, the HTML feud was none other than him creating some fun and fake drama in relation to the story of the next game, which at this time, of course, was FNAF 6. And it turned out, while this was planned to seem as though there was a fight going on, it was, of course, only in relation to that narrative in the games, with the fight likely resembling the one within Ennard between all the shared consciousness of animatronics.
And at 4, Nightmares in VR. On that same line of thinking, how are the Nightmare animatronics present in FNAF VR? If we are to assume that FNAF 4 is an actual canon plot point in the series, then these animatronics being present would be impossible. The only way that this could make sense would be if FNAF 4 specifically was one of the games that Scott's in-universe counterpart made. That's the only way that Fazbear Entertainment would know what these animatronics looked like, and it would explain why they would be present in the game that they're using to say, like, yeah, this happened, but we're better now, since they're trying to rebuild their reputation as we learn in this game. But that also calls into question every other game that we've played, because FNAF 1, 2, 3, parts of 4, and even sister location animatronics are in FNAF VR, which would mean that if they remade FNAF 4 because it was an in-universe game, every other FNAF game before this or even before FNAF 6 would be just that, a game.
Getting close to the end at number 3, 5 dank nights at memes. Look, considering how every time I try to say this title I say 5 Nights at Dank Memes instead of the actual title should speak for itself. While yes, the game is bad, it somehow managed to get itself 2 sequels, one of which is still in the works to my knowledge. There's a phone guy call that is literally a robot reading the same night one phone call that you get in FNAF. Plus, the doors are just red and gray boxes that say Meme Door and Big Meme Door on them. Oh, also it's on Scratch. The cameras are inaccessible as far as I could tell, and the fact that Shrek is the one who killed me is sad. And he only killed me because there was a delay between opening the doors and then closing them again, which isn't present in the normal game. While yes, you made a game and it's impressive, you took no care in making the game good. If you had a little more concentration or devotion and had tried this again, it may have been good, but it's also available on Scratch and there is no good FNAF games on Scratch.
But ultimately, in at number 2, Jeremy. If you spend too much time looking into names, then you're really going to be in for a crapshoot when it comes to FNAF, considering how Scott has used the first name Jeremy way too many times for a fanbase as detail attentive as this one, because the name Jeremy has been used for the first night guard from FNAF 2, the victim who possesses Bonnie, and the first Freddy Fazbear Virtual Experience game tester who ends up cutting his face off because Glitch Trap got to him. If you really want to think that Scott puts every single detail in this and like it's meant for those details to all mean something special, how do you explain this. Okay, most of the time people just write this off as a troll, which means that if this is a troll, other things could be trolls too, right? You can't just say that everything means something aside from the Jeremy thing. That just doesn't make any form of logical sense. And you know what? It doesn't even make a form of unlogical sense. Since if anything, the name being used 3 times would be more important than like passing comments made in one game, right? Exactly. But it doesn't mean anything, okay? Bonnie isn't getting resurrected multiple times. Jeremy isn't Satan or something like that. It's just a name. It's not that deep. Finally, in at number 1, Immortal and the Restless. This detail is the reason I made this entire list. This is one comment that I've been seeing time and time again. The Immortal and the Restless was a show to show us that Afton didn't want his kid or kids, so this theory makes no sense. These details and all the others are put in there for a reason. But like, we just went over 9 details that we have to ignore either in general for things to make sense or for your certain line of thinking to make sense. Or that we've just been ignoring the whole time, meaning that we can't take every single pixel of a scene into account when trying to find the big picture. The Immortal and the Restless has never popped up again after Sister Location. There has never been another instance of that show having any significance other than just being something we watched after work in that game. It didn't reveal the mother's name, it didn't reveal that Afton never wanted his son, because if he never wanted Crying Child, why would he have sworn to put him back together? Or revealed to Michael that Elizabeth was possessed, or literally anything else that we've seen happen in this series. It just doesn't make sense. The Immortal and the Restless shows up less often than the name Jeremy. And honestly, it has just as little significance as the name. It was a soap opera, okay? What I watch on TV doesn't mirror my life or my family's situation unless it's Dr. Phil. And why would it mean that William didn't want Crying Child? Why couldn't it be that William thought his wife was having an affair? Maybe if this does have significance, it's meant to show that William snapped and killed his wife when Crying Child was born because he didn't think that it was his son. Yeah, exactly. Thank you for coming to my Fred Talk. Schooled.
Number 10, FNAF 6 cancelled. This one may have been less of a troll and more of like an actual post. I'm not even sure. That's how good this troll is. But Scott, it's hard to tell. The actual update to this Steam community post had him claiming that he'd actually never troll us. So once again, I'm pretty skeptical because yeah, saying that, you know, I would never troll you guys, would I? When you already have? Sounds like a troll to me. Troll alarm going off. We know that that ain't true. He's definitely trolled us in the past. In a post he made in June of 2017, Scott claimed he wanted to stop working on FNAF 6 and didn't want his next FNAF game to be something big and grandiose, just something light and fun. He even joked about making a pizzeria tycoon game instead, and yet we know what happened. We all know, which makes us think this post was actually intended to troll, as FNAF 6 did of course later came out. It was light and fun and was a pizzeria tycoon game, sure, but it was also only released a short while later and had major lore implications and narrative points divulged within it. So I gotta say, in retrospect, this seems like once again another troll, but cleverly disguised as a real post. Number 9, FNAF World Halloween Edition. This one came later, and yet there were still some folks who kind of fell for it. Mostly though, I think many of us just enjoy these pranks and buy into them because we want to see what Scott has cooked up this time around. He's just so good at trolling. With FNAF World Halloween Edition, it was released on October 28th of 2015, with a hacker by the username of lols_hacks, claiming they had gotten the files for FNAF World and were going to release them for free. When the files were released, as promised, it turned out to be FNAF World Halloween Edition, which was actually just a reskin of Scott Cawthon's old game, Fighter Mage Bard, and where these 3 classes that were in that game were reskinned as Freddy, Bonnie, and of course Chica. Turned out that lols_hacks was of course none other than Scott himself, once more trolling us. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Gaming, you need to go check out our newest channel, Most Amazing Top 10 Anime. Go on over, hit that subscribe, and tell them I sent you. Number 8, Foxy Fighters. Foxy Fighters was a game that was designed as a mini game and added to FNAF World after the 1.2 update. It was a fun little game where you controlled Foxy in a little plane that is armed with, well, like a little weapon. I wouldn't call it a fighter jet, but technically it's designed similar to one, although its look is radically different from most fighter jets in the real world. Foxy is controlled controlled using the WASD keys on the computer, and to fire, you just hit shift. It's a simply designed little game, and at one point Scott claimed he actually wanted to potentially work on a game that was all Foxy Fighter, sharing that he had so much fun making it just as a little game for fans to add into the FNAF world. Well, I do believe he did have fun making it. I think when he shared his potential interest in turning it into a full-fledged spin-off game all its own, it was definitely a form of a troll, because I don't see that ever happening.
And it's 7 Joy of Creation. There are actually some references to some of the Fazbear Fanverse Initiative games in Security Breach. For example, the Joy of Creation Easter egg of Ignited Freddy and Ignited Bonnie, found on the House of Bear and House of Bear 2 arcade cabinets found around the Pizzaplex. This is something that I actually picked up on my first time through, so needless to say, it was pretty cool that I was right about that. I was like, hey, isn't that Ignited Freddy? And it was. And the House of Bear cabinet has like the Ignited Freddy shadow standing in the doorway, and then the House of Bear 2 machine features Ignited Bonnie's face, which could be considered Withered Bonnie, but given the context of the Ignited Freddy in the first one, I'm gonna have to say it's Ignited Bonnie. But if you really want to think about this, this could explain how like the Fazbear games fit into the timeline, since the Fanverse could be the games that Scott's In-Universe counterpart made, which would explain why they would have their own FNAF 1 titled FNAF Plus. But honestly, we're probably meant to ignore this idea, because let's be honest, if that was the FNAF 1 of this universe, the company wouldn't have arcade cabinets featuring the characters. So this is probably just meant to be like a happy little reference for fans of that series and nothing more. Plus, it's Steelwool who was doing that, and not Scott.
Number 6, Ultimate Custom Night Demo. One of the latest in the line of game trolls we've gotten from Scott is Ultimate Custom Night Demo. This was released to the general public, but it turned out to just be a prank. While the actual demo did exist, it was only given to professional gaming YouTubers to do playthroughs and review the game prior to its release. The publicly released demo was actually a reskin of Scott Cawthon's very first computer game from 1989, Doofus the Dinosaur. Once again, faces and characters were replaced, or rather reskinned, to look like familiar FNAF characters and animatronics in each level of the game.
Halfway through number 5, Five Nights at Wario's. This game is in a similar vein to Five Nights at Sonic's, and while Sonic may feature characters from both Sonic and Mario, Five Nights at Wario's only focuses on the Nintendo spectrum of characters. The game's loading screen is horrifyingly awkward, the faces of Wario and Luigi are just all kinds of wrong. However, the game also plays exactly the same as FNAF. Like, even Scott Cawthon was able to find ways to mix things up. And while FNAF World may not have been a terrible success, I found myself loving the Danger Keep Out minigame in the Curse of Dreadbear DLC.
I can't reset the power until Chica's gone. I've reset Chica. Oh. Come on, go. Reset, come on.
The game plays exactly like the original FNAF, and it's why everyone dislikes it. If you wanted to play FNAF, you could just play FNAF. And like I said, sure, you can make a good game if you use the same mechanics like FNAC, but FNAC also has their own animatronics, their own characters. But with Five Nights at Wario's, you are literally just fighting against other famous characters like Wario, Waluigi, Mario, Luigi, and Peach. If you had made your own, I would have enjoyed it, but you didn't. So that's why you're on this list.
Number 4, Help Wanted. Scott is not above poking fun at himself or the franchise and enjoys trolling us even within the game and the world of FNAF. Case in point, his actual appearance in Help Wanted. Not in the flesh, but in picture form, implying that the games we play are created within the very world of FNAF itself and tarnish the reputation of Fazbear Entertainment, even as we play mini-games in the VR game inspired by the previous games themselves, which are apparently in the world, but also, I guess, actually happen. It is a meta paradox that we are in. It's a meta paradox, or at least that's what it feels like. Scott's picture is thrown up, and he is referred to as a nameless indie game developer who made said games, which, of course, is true, but also in the world of FNAF, it breaks my brain.
Getting close to the end, and at number 3, Fire Dave. Found in one of the various lore duffel bags that we can stumble upon in Security Breach, it's a customer complaint titled Hi Dave, which upon inspection reads, quote, "Customer complaint. You should fire Dave. He sucks." And while it is short and sweet and to the point, it's also seemingly a reference to the FNAF novels, since if you're unaware, in the novels William Afton was introduced, but at first he was going by the alias of Dave Miller, and considering how this customer says that you should fire Dave, I think that's a pretty telling way to reference the book's most infamous employee. And it's also a reference to the fact that Afton is in the Pizzaplex right below our noses, or I guess technically our feet. Though we would have to ignore this detail because it's not really going to have much more of an impact than that, just being a reference. It's just gonna be a guy named Dave, okay? No connection to anyone else.
Especially since, again, this game was from Steel Wool and not just Scott Cawthon, which is where most people tend to use the whole idea of, if Scott put it in the game, it has to mean something. But if you want to say that, and you don't want to listen to literally anything else I've said on this list, this was made by Steel Wool, so can't really use that here.
Number 2, Sister Location MA. Sister Location mature. As time went on, so too did the trolls, and I think they also got better too as time went on. Just my personal opinion. One of my favorite troll moments actually comes in association with one of my all-time favorite FNAF games, Sister Location. Now with Sister Location, just as the game was nearing its release date, Scott put out a statement claiming that the game, it actually might be too dark for release at this point, and he said he was thinking about spending another 6 months of development on it to make it more family friendly. The mature or MA version was shared, but it turned out it was once again just Scott trolling us. The real Sister Location was a bit darker, but still safe enough for all audiences, and was released the next day as planned. So it's all good. Wasn't mature enough for that rating. Number 1, Pizzeria Simulator. When you think about it, FNAF 6 itself was kind of like a troll all on its own. A really great troll though. An admirable troll that was also actually FNAF 6. Why do I consider FNAF 6 a troll? Because it appeared as a harmless pizzeria simulator even when you started playing it, but in reality, as time goes on, you learn it is a dark, depressing story covered in fake glitz, fun, and glam. Well, some real fun glitz and glam, I think, but also it's really dark. It wasn't a game that you could skip either, like was implied before. The story tied into this game was actually relevant to the whole franchise and the main narrative. So although it seemed light, it was still just as convoluted, necessary, and complex as other games that we'd had in the past. That also is kind of what makes FNAF 6 so great. It is the troll vibes of Scott Cawthon that we've enjoyed in the past made manifest in game form. Maybe the best kind of troll out there. I feel like game trolls are great, especially when you play games and you're like, I think I know what this is, and then they're like, whoa, no, you don't. I surprised you. You thought this was a fun dating sim? It's a horror game.
Alright, first things first, could Golden Freddy be a pure hallucination, and could that really make any sense? I mean, he seems to cause hallucinations for us, but is that him controlling them, or are they just appearing alongside him? Well, by definition, hallucinations are an experience involving the apparent perception of something not present. So they're sensory experiences that appear real but are created by your mind. They can affect all 5 of your senses as well, not just sight, and for example, you might hear a voice that no one else can hear in the room, or you can see an image that isn't real, or maybe even feel the texture of something that isn't actually there. I remember that as a kid, once I either was dreaming or hallucinated my basement being filled with boulders that I had to clean out. I don't know why I thought it was my job, but that kind of explains a lot now. My parents didn't see them though, and then just kept telling me to go to bed. They thought I was doing a bit or something, but this definitely explains a lot. Hallucinations though may be caused by mental illness, the side effect of medications, or physical illnesses like epilepsy or alcohol use. Not getting enough sleep can also lead to hallucinations. You may be more prone to hallucinations if you haven't slept in multiple days or didn't get enough sleep over longer periods of time, and it's also possible to experience hallucinations right before falling asleep, known as hypnagogic hallucinations, or right before waking up from sleep, known as hypnopompic hallucinations, which is why sometimes you may hear a voice or something that sounds like a voice while you're dozing off. But it's also not just limited to sleep. High fevers, migraines, social isolation, seizures, terminal illness, and high levels of stress can all also cause hallucinations. And honestly, based on the first game alone, I can see why we would have high levels of stress and probably be sleep deprived. I mean, our shift is from 12 to 6 AM, and that's only the part that we actually get to play, and I'm sure the working environment is pretty awful, and we're alone the whole time, which not only increases the stress, but the feelings of social isolation as well. And that's only within the first game. If we want to talk about the series as a whole, we play as Michael Abton in basically every game, with the exception of a few. So we can use this to kind of understand what's really going on. In the cutscenes to Sister Location, we learn that Michael was used as a vessel to help Ennard and whoever was inside of Ennard to escape the underground facility that's the main setting for that game. However, in the process, we end up becoming purple from all the bruising, because metal parts are moving inside of us, and the neighborhood we live in ends up becoming afraid of us. See the "you won't die" scene for proof of that one,
because everyone is hiding behind their homes as we walk down the street and then eventually puke entered out. They start off loving us, waving and smiling, but eventually become terrified and actively avoid us. If that's not gonna start the feeling of social isolation, I don't know what is. And I know what is. And we know that the original games have to come after these events because we're not only sent here by our father, who would have a tough time doing this trapped in a secret room, but also because of the cited reasons for being fired at the end of the original games. Odor is always listed, meaning that we've definitely been through some rough patches. And it's also worth noting that in Sister Location, where the stress, social isolation, and probably the sleep deprivation begin, Golden Freddy doesn't appear as an animatronic, but instead as a reference in the custom night menu, which can't really be considered canon, because in the actual story of the games you wouldn't be able to customize things. So Golden Freddy only starts showing up after Michael goes through extreme trauma, and seems to only be seen by Michael. Golden Freddy doesn't show up anywhere in promotional material for any of the restaurants, even before the Bite of 87, since him causing the Bite of 87 could be considered the reason why they stopped promoting him. But even in FNAF 2, which is just before the Bite of 87, since it may even take place during the events of that week, we don't see any art for the new Golden Freddy. While he does appear in the post-Night 3 cutscene, these are also referred to as the end of night hallucinations, meaning that they obviously aren't real. But also, it's an interesting point of contention. Here you would think that the theory would start to fall apart because, well, it's a hallucination, yes. At this point in the game, we're playing as Jeremy Fitzgerald, right? And while yes, during the main 5 nights we play as Jeremy, more on that later, that doesn't really mean that these hallucinations have to be his. Think about how the hallucinations are being presented, okay? They're the location from the first game, a game where we know we play as Michael Afton. Much like how Michael was part robot after his Sister Location fiasco, and we're inside the Freddy animatronic specifically, like how Michael would associate the character with the one who ended up killing his brother. And Golden Freddy shows up as another hallucination on top of that. These hallucinations are clearly meant to show us how Michael is figuring out what to do next. And not only are they showing the next location that he would go to, they're also what brings him to the FNAF 2 location. Notice how he sees the puppet after night 4 in game, and then we don't really get another end night cutscene. Simply because by night 6, we're actually playing as Mike. Sure, we get a check that says that Jeremy worked overtime, but really? Making or even letting an employee work overtime after one of your animatronics removed his frontal lobe? Yeah, no, that check is cleverly disguised hush money from an already shady company. Michael gets there on night 6 and takes over, only to get fired shortly thereafter. On the pink slip it says on the first day, really? But that seems to be one of those I think thou doth protest too much kind of things. Like, why do you feel the need to point that out on this pink slip? The notes section is for reasoning behind the firing and explanations, especially in a legal sense, so those who get fired can't really try and file wrongful termination suits, or at least if they do, they won't really have much legs. We also know that Fritz Smith is Michael Afton using an alias since he gets fired for the same reasons Michael does in the first game. The logical extension of that being that they're the same person, who had to change their name again when they applied to the next place because, you know, the company would have a record of Fritz Smith being fired. And considering how Fritz is one of the missing children's names, yeah, it's meant to be a fake name. Nobody other than Mike seemingly can see Golden Freddy, and whenever we do see him, it's never operational, and it's never in a tangible sense. In all forms, Golden Freddy is slumped over, there's no light in his eyes, and he's always in our office. We don't see him on a camera at any point, so where the hell on earth could he have come from if he is using supernatural abilities to move himself? Some explain this in the first game by saying that he was hiding out in the kitchen since the camera wasn't working, but in FNAF 2, we don't have any cameras that aren't functional, so where on earth could he have come from? It doesn't make sense even with the FNAF universe logic. Hell, we even see Shadow Freddy on the cameras, but not Golden Freddy. Huh. Weird. Speaking of his weird abilities, what's with the whole crashing us to the desktop thing? Every other animatronic sends us to the main menu, but Golden Freddy sends us to our desktop. That's a very odd detail that I don't think anyone is really questioning, but it certainly seems to indicate that there is something special about this character. And I don't think that it's that they're just angrier than the other ones, because that wouldn't really change anything. I think it's more symbolic than that. You see, the only other character that when killing us crashes us to our desktop is Nightmare from FNAF 4, and that is Not a coincidence. FNAF 4 is where we see the inciting moment that starts all of this trauma for Michael, where he feels guilty for getting his brother killed despite it not really being his fault. Sure, he put his brother's head in the animatronic mouth, but William is the one who made the mouth intentionally superpowered. When I've said this in the past, in previous videos, at one point someone used the analogy of if someone puts your hand under a hydraulic press and then your hand is crushed, it's not the person who made the hydraulic press's fault. And you know what? You're right, that's true. However, if that hydraulic press was designed to stop before it reached the hand, or it wasn't supposed to have enough power to actually crush a hand, then the manufacturer who gave it too much power or messed it up, it's them at fault. Or I guess, technically, a better analogy would be if your car's airbags don't deploy during an accident, since that's more realistic than a hydraulic press stopping. In a settlement reached following mediation, attorneys Alan Feldman, Daniel Mann, and Edward Goldis obtained a multi-million-dollar recovery on behalf of a teenage girl who suffered catastrophic brain injuries in a car accident. Her car slid off the road during a rainstorm and struck a tree broadside, and the head curtain airbags and the chest and thorax airbags in the vehicle failed to deploy during the accident. They could prove that if the car had been manufactured correctly, the girl wouldn't have suffered any injuries, and thus the company settled instead of taking it to court. The same principle applies here. Had this not have been William's own child, if the family who lost their kids sued William, he would have been cleaned out. But of course, Michael didn't know that it wasn't his fault at the time. He learned that after Sister Location, which sets him on his journey. But going back to the connection between Golden Freddy and Nightmare, they're the only two animatronics that crashes to the desktop. And while with Golden Freddy that may not make much sense, with Nightmare having the same ability, it sets a baseline for what's really going on when this happens. Nightmare in FNAF 4 is representative of death. He's the dark shadow that's coming after Crying Child during his coma in the hospital after the bite of 83. Notice how Nightmare is a shadow version of Nightmare Fredbear, Fredbear being the animatronic that he would be most afraid of, because you know, it's the one that crushed him. And his Ultimate Custom Night voice lines support this idea. Quote, "I am here to claim what is left of you. You will not be spared, you will not be saved, and I am your wickedness made of flesh." All of these are indicators that Nightmare is meant to be death, especially in FNAF 4. And when Nightmare gets us, we crash to the desktop. We truly die. Not like when the other animatronics get us and we go back to the main menu. This time around, we're actually jump scared to death. The same must be the case for Golden Freddy. And considering how Nightmare is in essence also a hallucination, it would make sense for Golden Freddy to be able to jump scare us to death as well. A death that doesn't involve violence, and instead your heart giving out due to fear, hence the desktop crash. Golden Freddy being a hallucination would not only explain a lot, but it would also help clear things up. Golden Freddy being a real animatronic allows for Cassidy to be the one you should not have killed, since she can possess William without us having to worry about who's in the suit. The "It's me" line also makes sense now, since it would be referring to the animatronic that killed Mike's brother, or it could even be Mike assuming that Crying Child went on to possess the Fredbear animatronic because Mike knows that Elizabeth is possessing Baby, and it makes sense why we can't see Golden Freddy on the cameras, why he's never advertised, but also why he would be haunting William in Ultimate Custom Night, since William would also see Golden Freddy as the one who took his son. Well, at least if it is William in Ultimate Custom Night, since with this revelation now, it could be Mike. Cassidy could still be possessing William, but someone else may be possessing Michael, causing him to suffer since he blames his big brother for his death. Michael being the Ultimate Custom Night player explains why we would still see Golden Freddy in the final cutscene. It makes sense with the dialogue of the Ultimate Custom Night death screens, and it explains why Spring and Scrap Trap are there, because why would William be haunting himself? He doesn't seem to regret anything he's done. Michael being possessed by Crying Child explains why he knows what Nightmare Fredbear looks like, since he draws it in the survival logbook, and it explains why Cassidy and Crying Child could communicate in that book, not because they share an animatronic, but because they share a purpose, to punish those who did them wrong, or I guess to punish those they consider the causes for their death. And then it allows for Michael to be possessing Glamrock Freddy for his redemption, because Crying Child was keeping him alive through FNAF 6's fire.